Hey everyone, so the DC Comics streaming service DC Universe has finally launched, and along with it, they have premiered their own original content, the very first episode of their original series called Titans. Now this series here, called Titans Talk, will be my series sort of dedicated to the show itself. Every time I get to see an episode, I will give, after I'm able to digest my thoughts a little bit, and exactly on how I want to phrase what I want to talk about the episode, I'll go ahead and film an episode, obviously based on each episode of the show, and just give my thoughts on it. Now, I don't necessarily have the access that a lot of other people do, where I'm going to constantly be able to have my reaction up the same night, maybe as the premiered episode, or even the next day. I'll get to it as soon as possible. Usually my filming dates, I'm going to try and have this Titans Talk episode up by about every Monday, maybe Tuesday at the latest. But let's go ahead and get back into Titans. So Titans essentially follows the story of, you guessed it, the Teen Titans. Now obviously they're in a much different setting and manner than we've seen them before, also minus Cyborg. But this is essentially their story and how they're going to come together to fight. To be honest, I really don't know what they're coming together to fight or what common cause is going to bring them together, but we'll go ahead and get into that in a minute. But essentially the series stars Brennan Thwaites as Robin / Dick Grayson, Anna Diop, I believe is her name, who is Starfire, although she does not get that name in this premiere episode. Also Tegan Croft as Raven, or Rachel as she goes by in this series, and as well as Ryan Potter, who's going to be playing Beast Boy, although we do get very little of him. He is a little bit at the end, but essentially non-existent in this premiere episode. Now, in terms of performances for the actors, which I just mentioned, obviously Ryan Potter, like I just said, he wasn't really in the episode, so I can't really judge his performance. From what I can tell, hopefully he'll be a good Beast Boy, but that's going to be up for judgment based on how it's going to progress throughout the season and have more interactions with him. As for Starfire, I thought she was so-so. There was only limited amount of information we got to learn from her or about her character. There's a little bit of a struggle there because she kind of has this amnesia, so I'm not sure, because she gets in a car wreck, so I'm not entirely sure if they're going to progress that throughout the entire season, if she will remember who she is. She kind of seemed like she was a spy of some kind, which is kind of different from exactly how Starfire is. I mean, she's essentially like an alien princess. So how they're going to sort of progress her story, that's going to be really interesting. We're going to have to wait to see exactly how Starfire progresses. In terms of Raven, Tegan Croft, I think she was actually really cool. Raven, to me, is one of those characters that has that tragic sort of weird backstory that can really go into a very dark place. And based on how this series is, it actually is that dark and gritty version. So having Raven go into those directions probably won't be too difficult. I kind of hope they focus on it, although it may be very CG heavy and kind of difficult, especially for being a first-time streaming service. It may be a little bit difficult with like graphics and stuff, but I definitely think that she might have one of the most interesting stories of the entire series. And then there's Robin. Robin, I think, is one of the most underrated characters of DC, possibly of comics ever. I think Dick Grayson is one of the greatest comic book characters. Robin, Nightwing, progression, he even becomes Batman eventually. One of the greatest characters ever, in my opinion. But Brennan Thwaites actually does a really good job of filling out the role. He is a little bit older of a Robin. He's sort of separated himself from Batman due to essentially unforeseen reasons, but he kind of splits from Batman, saying that they're sort of on different paths, and he just wasn't the man he wanted to be, and he wanted to sort of be his own person and do things his way. I think that's really important, especially for the progress of Robin becoming part of the Teen Titans and eventually possibly progressing into that Nightwing role to sort of shed that Robin persona and become his own thing with Nightwing. Now, in terms of the first episode, appropriately titled Titans, I think that it had a little bit of a struggle. I think that there were a lot of great things in there, things that will probably lead to some even better things down the road throughout this series. But in terms of a premiere episode, it was okay. It didn't really have that great moment that made me want to say, wow, I really want to keep watching this series. It just sort of is coming back to it because it's number one, it's the Teen Titans, which I think is a great group of heroes. I mean, I watched the Teen Titans go to the movies and laugh my butt off. But this is a very different version of the Teen Titans than we've ever seen before. So that has me intrigued, but it's not necessarily keeping me on the hook to want to come back every single episode. I'm mainly coming back for the characters themselves. The story didn't really hook me that much, but I'm hoping that it kind of bounces back and reintegrates and brings them together somehow in a fun and interesting way that actually wants to make you want to watch it and really engage the viewers. And interestingly enough, one of the biggest criticisms that I've seen online about Titans has actually come from the violence of the show. And I think that's kind of difficult to gauge. Yes, there is some violence in the show. Robin kicks some serious ass a couple of times in the episode. Raven actually kills a guy. There's a lady that gets killed. There is plenty of violence throughout the series. But this is DC here. DC talking about the group that killed Batman's parents right issue number 1 every single time in some sort of gross, not necessarily gross way, but like it's not necessarily the lighthearted Marvel that we're all used to. It's not necessarily Uncle Ben getting shot off of a panel and then Peter Parker discovering it. Batman is there when his parents die. Like this series and DC in general is very gritty and sort of, I mean, it's about gods essentially with like Superman, Wonder Woman, things like that. But it's very down to earth, and especially with the Teen Titans, they are a sort of like the defenders of the DC universe. They're the very street level superheroes, although they do have supernatural abilities. They are much more grounded in a lot of ways. We're talking about Robin, who's going to be their leader, who is just a human, essentially as Batman is, with a troubled past. He again watched his parents die right in front of him. Then there's Raven, who has a very tragic past, who I'm hoping we get into because it's very interesting. But I mean, she's essentially like the daughter of a demon. So what sort of violence do you think? Obviously, there's going to be a lot of violence that's going to come from that. But people being so critical of it is what sort of astounds me. Starfire, I mean, she's, again, an alien princess that can kind of shoot lasers and fire, I guess, out of her hands in this series, which will be interesting. Beast Boy, I mean, they kind of tease to it in, like, the trailers where he is essentially naked when he morphs, versus in, like, the cartoons he always has clothes and stuff. But, I mean, it's just going to be gritty. It's going to be different. DC's going to do things their way. And I think taking that approach where it is more violent, it is more gritty, kind of is necessary because they're very much grounded in that territory. So going that direction makes a lot of sense. Now, in terms of my concerns for the series, and especially rooted in this episode, one of my biggest concerns has to be how long it took for the Titans to even sort of get together, or at least even Robin and Raven. They took a long time sort of introducing some of these characters with Starfire's sort of storyline, Robin's storyline, Raven's storyline. They took a little bit to sort of come together even with just 2 of them, let alone the 4 main characters of this series. And then Beast Boy was just sort of tossed in at the end. Like, I'm really concerned that they don't really know how to bring them together, which leads me into my second biggest concern, is that I don't feel like there's some big threat or something that's going to actually be a reason for them to come together. A lot of team-ups are driven by the big bad, or the thing that's going to cause them to come together, to unite, to be able to be friends, even if they butt heads, in order to defeat this common cause. This series didn't feel like it had that. This one, it just sort of feels like they're sort of all doing their own thing, and then eventually we're going to try and figure it out down the road to tie it all together, which is really concerning for me, especially since the Teen Titans seem to work best when they have that big bad. The best big bad that they ever have, of course, is Slade Wilson, Deathstroke, which I don't think they're going to incorporate, especially in this premiere season, but they need to have that common cause. Otherwise, they're just sort of, hey, you're a guy, hey, I'm a guy, hey, that's a girl, let's all hang out. It really doesn't make a lot of sense and kind of makes for sloppy writing as well as a boring show. So I'm hoping whatever that they figured out to bring them together, unite, whatever you want to call it, is actually interesting enough and engaging enough to actually want people to watch it. Otherwise, the series is just going to fall flat. Overall, I do have a lot of hope for this series. I think that there's a lot of interesting things that are scattered throughout this episode and hopefully throughout the series that will be able to engage us, bring us together, want us to actually watch these characters grow and actually interact. I know that they're not going to come together in the same exact way that we all know and love with like the Teen Titans having a cyborg. They're all sort of having fun. There may be a Titans Tower, all that stuff. It looks like that's going to be completely off limits for this show as they want to take that dark and gritty approach. But I do have a lot of hope in thinking that they might actually be able to pull it off if they tell these stories in the right way and be able to engage the viewers to actually want to come back and watch it, because the DC streaming service where you can actually watch this is not that cheap. I mean, it's $7.99 a month or $75 a year. Now, in grand scheme of things, if you have like Netflix and Hulu, that's kind of expensive. So they're really going to have to pull out all the stops in order to get people to want to come back to their streaming service to actually want to watch this series. But I do have a lot of hope for the series. I am kind of on the fence on exactly how I feel about certain things, but I'm leaning more towards optimistic just because I have that hope that it actually will do well. And for that reason, the overall grade that I have to give the premiere episode of Titans, entitled Titans appropriately, is going to be a C+. So guys, those are my thoughts on Titans in this premiere episode of Titans Talk, episode number 1, talking about, of course, the premiere episode. Let me know how you like this series, if you actually are engaging, if you like it a lot. If you have actually gotten a chance to see the episode of Titans, make sure you let me know your thoughts in the comment section down below. I would actually love to hear from you guys and know what your thoughts are and exactly where the series is going to go, what you liked, what you didn't like. I have my hopes, like I said. I think Robin and Raven are going to be my two biggest stockholders. Like, those are the two biggest eggs in this basket. But hopefully they can bring and round out those other characters and make it a lot more interesting as well. Like I said, let me know your thoughts below. I'm really interested to find out. Other than that, that's all I have for now. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I hope to see you in the next one.